Okay. So welcome to our 32nd episode of the Morgan Horse Source. Thank you for coming on. Our first
Thank you for
question
having me.
our first question for you is, how did you get involved with the Morgan horse breed?
I actually got involved with the Morgans by a phone call from Howie Schatzberg. He called me, letting me know there's a position at it was Peeper Ranch at the time that Phil Fountain had injured himself, and they needed somebody to come in and train. And I had never worked a Morgan until I went there, and that's how I started with the Morgans. And a fun fact is the first Morgan I worked when I got there was Gray Cliff Tony, and I was like, wow, these Morgans are fancy. So that's how I started, was all due to Howie Schatzberg.
What made you want to be a horse trainer specifically?
I grew up riding. I started when I was 8, and ever since, my mom tells me, ever since I like my second lesson, I said I was going to be a horse trainer. So I spent as much time in the barn as I could, and I just always had that goal that I was going to be a horse trainer. I went to school at William Woods so that I could get a degree in equestrian science. And so I guess just from the age of 8 years old, I decided this is what I was going to do, and I never stopped.
Is there anything in particular that showing or training horses has taught you?
Showing and training horses has taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot about patience and and giving time to let things progress. You know, it's a process. Training horses, it's a process with yourself, getting better, mastering skills. So I think it's definitely taught me a lot of life lessons and helped me just become a stronger person, a stronger rider. Yeah, but it's done a lot for me.
What was the process of starting Rose Haven Farm like?
I had, I want to say like 20 Morgans in training, and Austin had 16 saddlebreds, and I had 2 saddlebreds as well. And so he moved to Kentucky, and we combined the barn to do both. And luckily, we both had a clientele to begin with, so it made it easier that we were able to do that. And then the fun part was designing the logo, getting curtains and doing, you know, designing your setups and all that stuff. But it was the combining of Austin's horses and my horses that really made Rose Haven. And how we came up with the name is we took the R in Rafferty and then the H in Hazelwood, which is his last name, and we tried to come up with something that was both of our names in one. So that's how we got Rose Haven Farm.
Do you have any mentors or people that you looked up to while starting your career?
Yes, so there's definitely 2 standouts. I worked for Todd Miles for a few years, and him and I have been really close ever since. I've looked up to him. I think he's one of the best horse trainers out there, and he helps me to this day with a lot of horses. I call him and work on horses through the phone, and he's been one of the most supportive people of my career. And a lot of my decisions in making Rose Haven, and still to this day, like I said, I call him. He's helped me and talked me through the process. And then another one is Mike Go Big. Go Big is somebody that I definitely look up to. He has an amazing show record. He has amazing horses, but he has been the most supportive person during my career and encouraging me to keep going. And he's always the first one to congratulate me. And we talk on the phone all the time, and he's just I look up to him so much and I appreciate how much support he gives me. So Todd and Mike Go Big are definitely my biggest two mentors and my biggest supporters, which I feel very lucky about.
Do you have any tips for those who are wanting to start their own farm, specifically about building your own clientele and resume?
Yeah, I think that like I was saying earlier about the process and just taking the time. I mean, owning your own barn and starting your own barn is a huge step. And I mean, some days I still wonder if I'm ready for it, but definitely just taking the time and not rushing things. That's one thing that I've learned, that things kind of happen on their own. And if you can take the time and, really work for somebody that you really respect and learn as much as you can and work your way up, that definitely helps. And also the relationships that you build when you are working for people, that makes it easier when you go to have clientels because people have worked with you. We've had a lot of people who have sent us some young horses because we've worked in barns with them previously. So definitely, I think as many relationships as you can build, you never know who's watching or who wants to send you a horse, and it's just waiting for the opportunity. For the resume part, I think that the biggest thing, like I said, is working for somebody you respect and then sticking it out for a while. It's hard, it's a very hard job. And I think the longer you can stay and work with one barn and really figure out what you want to do, there's barns that are heavy in lessons, some that are, do the colts, and some that do amateurs, and kind of figuring out what your niche is, that can definitely help your resume, and then working for other barns that fit where you think you belong.
Do you have a favorite memory from showing?
Definitely when I won the English Pleasure Open with Another Dream. I think that you're going to ask this too, but she's my favorite horse that I've had. And that was definitely my favorite memory. I don't think I've ever been as nervous as I was to show in that class. And she was the best I've ever had her, and it was the most fun. And she was just so special. And winning that class is obviously a lifelong dream of mine. And I think I'm the youngest person to do it. So that's kind of cool.
And you obviously answered this, but do you have a favorite Morgan, maybe that you've just watched, not necessarily worked with personally?
Favorite Morgan that I just watched. That's a good question. I do have a lot of favorites, and now I can't. I mean, I really loved and always thought it would be so fun to ride George Jetson, meet George Jetson. He's definitely one that I watched from afar, and I was like, that one looks fun to ride. He's probably up there, and I always loved What's Up. We had him for a short time when he was 3, so I never got to do anything with him. He sold right when I started, but him and George Jetson, they look like the most fun to ride, definitely.
And then changing the subject a little bit, what would you look for in a potential breeding stallion?
In a breeding stallion, I tend to look at what the mare needs to try to improve on. So there's some stallions that are so, say, beautiful in their face, and maybe your mare needs to be prettied up a little bit. So I go towards that. Or even if your mare needs some size, or to breed her to a big stallion. Or I think that a lot of what you breed comes from the mare. So I always look at the stallions and how they can help improve the mare, instead of the other way around. So I definitely really focus on the mare and what she needs. If she needs a little bit of a longer neck, or if she needs to be more appetitive, say she's a hunter, I would breed her to, say, Jake Ryan, and something to get their heads way up high. So I focus mostly on the mares and how you can help them, is my philosophy on it.
How do you go about starting a horse that is green?
Green in the way like a baby, or just
Maybe inexperienced or not been started yet in general, but youngsters too is fine.
um We start by teaching them to lunge, and then we go on from there, and then they get to learn how to long line. And then which is not always common, but we break all of our horses to drive first, Morgans and saddlebreds. It's more common in the Morgans and then the saddlebreds, but we always drive first, even if we think they're going to be a Western horse or never show in driving. That's a really big step for us. It teaches them how to steer better. It teaches them how to go around an arena. And then when you go to ride them, generally they're way more advanced and stronger. So that's the progression we go. So riding is actually the last thing we do, which obviously works out if the Morgans only being able to drive their 2-year-old year, but that's how we do it. And we don't really break any Morgans to ride until after Oklahoma, their 2-year-old year, or even into the winter. And then get them finished.
How do you prepare a horse to show at the national level?
I think that preparing a horse at the national level definitely goes to all the details get important. From even making sure that you're turning out your horses the best that you can. Little things like that make a bigger difference than I think a lot of people realize, like making sure your horse is super clean, that their tails look great, your tack is clean, and then going on to the next steps, which would be cleaning up things that set you apart from everyone else. Say like your transitions. If that's something you need to work on, or the transitions count for more than I think people realize. And when you get to that kind of level, the judges have to judge everything. So working on your transitions, working on your ringmanship, and just taking everything that you work on to the next level and really polishing your horse and your rider and making sure that they're ready to go to a big horse show.
Do you have any advice to share for someone looking to be a horse trainer?
Yeah, I definitely think that if you want to be a horse trainer, the best thing to do is just start in the barn, start helping out, learning. The biggest thing about horse training is that two horses are the same, so you never stop learning. So if you have that philosophy moving forward, I think to this day I learn stuff, and that's one of the big things that Todd told me, is that we always keep learning. So I think as much as you can have an open mind and be willing to learn from everybody and anybody, and it might not work out for you, that's big. And definitely just doing the time, working for people you really respect and you want to be like. I always looked up to Todd, and when he had DeLovely specifically, so that's why I worked there and try to get a job there. So I think that's a big part of it. And just realizing that it might take a little bit more time, but it'll be worth it in the end. And it's a very rewarding career, that's for sure. And you're gonna hang out with horses.
And then is there anything else you would like to share?
No, I don't think so.
If anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourselves or put them in the chat. What are your future goals?
My future goals are my big goal would definitely be to win the Park Saddle Open. That would be really cool. And to keep, there's not a lot of barns that do both Morgans and Saddlebreds to the level that Austin and I do, or the volume. So that's one of my biggest goals, is to keep it 50-50 and really compete with the best Morgans and the best Saddlebreds in the industry. But definitely the Park Saddle, I'd like to win that.
All right. Well, if nobody else has any questions, thank you for coming on. We enjoyed having you.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.